If you want a cargo or passenger van with a V8 engine under the hood, there are just 3 options, or perhaps just 2, depending on how you count them. We have the Nissan van right here, and then we have the GMC and Chevy Twins from General Motors. If, however, you're looking for a high-roof cargo van that still has a V8 engine under the hood and has an incredibly high towing capacity, you have just one option, the Nissan NV with the factory high roof. In this configuration, it can still tow 9,500 pounds while having over 2 tons of cargo on the inside. When properly equipped, the Nissan NV high roof van will tow just 500 pounds less than the top entry in this segment, which would be GM's cargo vans with the optional and very expensive turbo diesel engine. This is about a full ton more than you'll find the towing capacity in the Ford Transit and several tons higher than you'll find in the Ram ProMaster. I should mention up front that we're not really going to be talking too much about the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter. There's a reason for that. The Sprinter is fantastically expensive compared to every other cargo or passenger van in this segment. This is thousands of dollars less expensive than a Sprinter in its base form. It is one of the least expensive cargo vans you can buy in the United States. However, if you're talking about fleet pricing, then that margin grows even larger. So if you're a company that's out there shopping for 20, 30, 40 of these a year, you'll actually get much better prices in the Nissan, the Chevy, the Ford, the Ram, etc. than you'll find over there in the Mercedes. It's a very, very large difference at that point. That's why in this video we'll be primarily focusing on the vans from Ford, General Motors, and from Chrysler. The front-end design is related to the last generation Nissan Titan, not the current Nissan Titan that was just recently released. So we have this very large grille right up front with these chrome bars, large Nissan logo, very large cooling area right here, and then tow hooks in our particular model. When you take a look at the side profile of the NV, you'll notice something very different than the rest of the competition right away. This does not have that very short-looking European front end that we find in the new Ford Transit or in the Ram ProMaster. We instead have a very long pickup truck style hood that's been grafted onto this very large bread van box behind. The practical benefit to this design means that the engine is entirely under the hood. It's not in a doghouse between the front seat footwells. The obvious downside is space efficiency. Because we have that long hood up front, the overall length of the NV is about the same as General Motors' extended wheelbase vans. It's quite a large vehicle. However, on the inside, in the low roof version, we have about the same kind of interior space as we find in General Motors' short wheelbase van. High roof vans really aren't new, although they were a novelty in the United States until relatively recently. You've probably seen some of those factory conversion vans from the 80s or 90s out there. The problem is in those factory conversion vehicles that the doors are generally not extended when the roof is popped. Obviously, the NV is all about practicality. So we get the dual doors. They stop in this position, although you can press this little release hatch right here and then extend them all the way to the side of the vehicle like that. Below this pickup truck-like bumper, we have a 2-inch receiver and, of course, a 7-pin wiring harness, and towing capacity tops out at a whopping 9,500 pounds. Under the hood, we have 2 different engines. Things start out with a 4-liter V6 engine producing 261 horsepower and 281 pound-feet of torque. Then we have this engine right here, which is a 5.6-liter V8. This 5.6 is not Nissan's latest V8 engine design, so it produces 317 horsepower and 385 pound-feet of torque in this configuration. That's a little bit less than you'll see in its latest applications. Both engines are mated to a 5-speed automatic transmission, sending power to the rear wheels only. However, if you're after 4-wheel drive, there are aftermarket conversions that will add it to the NV, just like we see in the GM and the Ford vans. Front seat comfort is excellent for a commercial vehicle. Our model has a multi-way power driver's seat and adjustable lumbar support with that knob right there. You do find a tilting but not telescoping steering column. For reference, that means that at 6 feet tall, it's very easy for me to find a good driving position in the NV, but if you were shorter or taller than me, then you may have some troubles. Aside from the steering column, however, the rest of the NV is definitely designed to accommodate larger or taller drivers. We have an incredible amount of headroom even in the short roof version, and this driver's seat has a very large range of motion. The seat upholstery was definitely designed with durability in mind. We have the fabric center section for comfort and breathability, but then we have this vinyl section and stiffer padding to increase durability of the seat edge right there. We also find a storage bin right under the seat itself. The model that we're driving is the cargo version of the NV, but if you opted for the passenger version, you could seat 12 inside. If we were in the passenger version, the second row right here would have a 2-person bench, and then a single seat, then a 2-person bench, then a single seat, and in the back of the vehicle, we would have 2 2-person benches. The benefit to this seating arrangement is that you have a wider variety of seating configurations if you do plan on using your NV for a combination of passenger and cargo holding. You could, for instance, leave a two-person bench right here in the second row of the vehicle. You'd still be able to put 10-foot things inside the vehicle from the back of this front passenger seat all the way to the back of the cargo area, but you'd also be able to seat 4. Speaking of cargo, you can obviously stuff a great deal inside the Nissan NV. Obviously 4x8 sheets of anything will fit in here. You can also fit 4x10 sheet things between the wheel wells, between those rear doors, and the front seats right back here. However, this is not as long as General Motors' extended vans. So while you could put a 13-foot item from the rear there on up to the dashboard, it's not going to be quite as convenient as that long Chevy van for carrying long items, not necessarily tall items. When it comes to the actual cubic feet of cargo capacity, 234 cubes is what will fit in a low roof version. That roof ends right about here. This high roof version bumps that up to 321 right about here. 321 cubic feet of space is about the same as you'll find in GM's long vans. 241 is about what you'll find in GM's short vans. So the actual cubic feet of room inside is very similar one van to the other. It's just a matter of how it's shaped. A nice touch that helps improve cargo practicality is this fold flat front passenger seat. So you can fold it down right like that, and then that gives you an extra about 2 feet or so to put long items from the back of the vehicle right up here to the dashboard. Obviously, you can't fit large heavy items because they will be sitting right here on top of the seat, but if you needed to carry 12-foot pipes, 12-foot ladder, something along those lines, this is definitely an option. Hopping inside the NV, you'll notice that they pop the top right here above the driver and front passengers' heads, so we get a great increase in headroom right there. We have height adjustable seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger, two-way adjustable headrests, and if I move on up here, you'll notice that we have access to the area right here where the roof starts increasing in height. You can actually use that for storage. Outside the front window, you notice that we have extending tow mirrors. Move on over to the doors themselves. We have that large glass right up there, and everything that you see right there is a hard plastic. So even the armrest right there, the lower portion of the door, that's all hard. We have storage bins integrated into the lower portion of the doors as well. From this angle, you can again see that we have the vinyl outboard sections of the seat and the cloth inserts in the middle. As we see in most commercial vehicles, the dashboard is also hard-touch plastic. We have a hard plastic glove box that is a little bit larger than I expected. Many commercial vehicles have very small glove compartments. This one is a larger bin style, and it was able to accommodate a tablet computer. Although the majority of the dashboard in our model is this gray color, the driver focus section is black. We have large air vents, 4 of them across the dashboard. They all open and close, which is a very nice touch. You'll find storage cubbies right here below the infotainment system, and then right over here to the left of the climate control. In our model, we have the low-cost infotainment and navigation system, which is essentially borrowed out of some of Nissan's less expensive vehicles. This is actually one of my favorite nav systems available in the market because it is very well priced. It's also very well featured. We have auxiliary inputs, USB inputs, we have Sirius XM satellite radio. We also have the navigation database right over here in an SD card slot and a single slot optical disc player. The nav system's graphics may not be as snazzy as we see in some of the systems out there, but you'll notice the touchscreen is very responsive. We also have traffic information displayed right there. The system also offers Sirius XM Travel Link and, of course, some limited smartphone integration, Google Online Search, and Facebook right there. Moving down from that, we have a single-zone manual climate control in the cargo model, and then we have a 12-volt power outlet. You'll find the control for the integrated inverter, 400 watts or 150 watts, tow mode button, parking sensor enable or disable button, and the USB and auxiliary input. Because there's no engine doghouse between the passenger footwell and the driver's side footwell, we find not only more footroom over here on the driver's side, we also have more storage space available to the driver and front passenger. So we have storage cubbies right here. We have a slot where you can insert cards, 2 very large cup holders, one extremely large one right there, easily able to accommodate large thermoses, 2 more cup holders, a cell phone storage slot, and then a deep storage bin below that. As we see with the doors and the dashboard, the center console is a hard plastic. That is a little bit disappointing to me. I wish this was a softer plastic for an armrest. You can, however, use a binder clip right here to store paperwork. That's why that has that little cutout right like that. The center console is also lockable. We have a removable tray right here. You can see what size that is with the wallet right there. And we have the ability to put hanging file folders laterally across this opening. It is a very large and very deep storage well. Stick my arm right down there, it goes past my elbow. Over on the driver's side, we have a fairly basic instrument cluster. We have a tachometer on the left, speedometer on the right, engine temperature, and of course a fuel gauge over there. Everything else is provided by the LCD between the tachometer and the speedometer. Interestingly enough, although we do see a range indication right there of 117 miles, we do not have an average fuel economy. That's average miles per hour that you're seeing right there. The system is fairly basic. We have a clock, we have the ability to see our tire pressure and change very limited amount of settings in the system, mainly the units. You can also toggle through various displays like our engine oil pressure, voltage, and transmission temperature. The steering wheel is borrowed also out of Nissan's Titan pickup truck. Although this is a urethane steering wheel, not a leather wrap model, we still have the sport grips right up top. On the left side of the steering wheel, we can change the source, track, volume up, down, dedicated phone hang up and pickup buttons, and on the right side of the steering wheel, you'll find the controls for the cruise control. Nissan's goal when creating the NV cargo van was to try and attract shoppers that had left cargo vans for pickup trucks. It's very obvious driving the NV out on the road and just looking at the vehicle that this is a very pickup truck-like cargo van. Pickup truck shoppers didn't want to have to deal with the fact that there's that engine between the front seats, which limits leg room and also sort of cooks your right leg when you're driving the vehicle on a hot summer's day. They didn't want to deal with that sort of thing because pickup trucks don't have those same problems. The 5.6-liter V8 engine is notably more powerful than the V6 engines that are naturally aspirated over there in the Ford Transit, the V6 in the ProMaster, or the base 4.8-liter V8 that we see in the GM vans. This vehicle ran from 0 to 60 in 7.9 seconds, even though this is one of the heaviest versions of the NV, obviously without cargo in the back. As a matter of comparison, the Ram ProMaster ran from 0 to 60 in 9 seconds with its V6 and front-wheel drive setup. When it comes to braking, I'm going to give this an A-. We stopped from 60 to 0 in 140 feet, which is definitely longer than the average vehicle out there, although it is a little bit more close to the average 2500 series pickup truck. In our tests, the Dodge ProMaster stopped the shortest at 135 feet and the Ford Transit came in at 146 feet, which was a little bit longer. Obviously, if handling is important to you, nobody is going to be choosing a cargo van, but as far as cargo vans go, the NV handles fairly well. I'm going to give this an A- when it comes to vans. This really does feel like a large pickup truck with a camper shell attached to it out on the road. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of weight in the rear, and that really is the limiting factor when it comes to handling. If you're after a van with more car-like driving dynamics, that would be the Ford Transit. Interestingly enough, I would not say that of the Ram ProMaster. The Ram ProMaster just feels a little bit unusual. It's definitely a Euro-funky vehicle. It has a front-wheel drive setup, but the vehicle feels very much like a commercial vehicle all the way around. Even its driving position with the way the steering wheel is tilted in the vehicle, the whole thing feels very much like a medium-duty truck. Even though this Nissan is one of the larger cargo vans out there, the turning circle is tighter than I had expected. It means it's much easier to deal with this vehicle in inner-city traffic than an extended wheelbase Chevy van. However, the Ram ProMaster has an incredibly tight turning circle, so if you're really trying to navigate city streets and you want to be able to make U-turns in residential areas, that ProMaster is going to be the best option. The model that we're driving is the NV 3500 high roof, which does mean that this has the stiffest springs available. The stiffer springs give us the highest load capacity possible, but they do take a toll on the ride. Even so, the NV is a fairly heavy van, so the ride comes in at an A- for a cargo van. This is definitely going to feel, again, more like your average 2500 series pickup truck. The model that we're driving has a padded load floor, and that does help the cabin noise. We still scored 75 decibels, however, which makes this one of the noisier vehicles in the segment. You can also thank the high roof, which does increase the wind noise. Fuel economy is the main area where the NV falls well behind the competition. We have been averaging between 12 and 13 miles per gallon in the NV 3500, and that is definitely below basically every other entry in this segment, except for General Motors vans with their large 6-liter V8 engine under the hood. The Nissan Titan pickup truck on which the NV was originally based does not really excel at fuel economy in the pickup truck segment, and that translates directly over here into this cargo van. Of course, keep in mind we are driving the model with the high roof, and that really seriously impacts your highway fuel economy. The important thing to remember in this commercial vehicle segment is that vehicles with gross vehicle weights this high are not required to have EPA testing and EPA certified fuel economy figures. So you notice that the window sticker on this vehicle has no fuel economy number listed. The same thing happens in every other cargo van out there. If you're after the best fuel economy, that would be in the small diesel engines that we find in the Ford and the Ram. Both of those will get over 25 miles per gallon on average if you treat them very gently. If you're after the best fuel economy in a gasoline van, then you're going to have to deal with a V6 engine. You will find the best fuel economy numbers again in the Ford and the Ram with their V6 engines, but they're going to be significantly less powerful than this. They're not going to be able to tow as much either. The big takeaway out on the road is how much more comfortable this vehicle is to drive than the average commercial vehicle. The seat is more comfortable, the driving ergonomics are more comfortable, the interior is much more normal vehicle-like. This is the same sort of thing that we're seeing in the brand new Ford Transit. Because we don't have the engine sitting here right between my seat and the front passenger seat, it means that my right leg is not cooking itself as we go, and anybody that spent any length of time driving a Chevy van in Phoenix can tell you that it gets very, very hot down there right by your right foot. As we start talking pricing and comparisons, it's important to remember that I'm talking about manufacturer suggested retail prices. That's important especially in this commercial vehicle segment because large fleet purchasers will get discounts or rebates based on the volume of their yearly purchases. In addition, many dealers out there on commercial vehicles or large passenger vans, they're going to put a decent amount of cash on the hood, and that applies to all manufacturers, some more than others, however. For 2016, Nissan has priced the NV very aggressively. The 1500 van, which is the base cargo model, starts at $26,740. Just like we see in pickup trucks, there are three different tiers of NV cargo van. We have 1500, 2500, and 3500, and that generally relates to the payload ability of the vehicle. If you've been paying attention to the commercial van space, you'll know that General Motors recently killed off their 1500 cargo van, and all they have now is a 2500 and a 3500. That means they don't really have a V6 model that competes directly with the NV 1500 V6. If you want a V8 engine, you'll have to step up to the 2500, and that starts at $27,740, and you add just about an extra $1,000 in order to get the V8 engine. The V8 engine is standard in the 3500 at $30,640, and that will give you the highest payload capacity. If you want to pop the top in your NV cargo van, you can do that for $2,100, but you can only do that in the 2500 and 3500. The passenger version of the NV cargo van is a little bit interesting because Nissan does not offer a high-top version of the passenger van, which is something that I think I would prefer. It would make getting in and out of it an awful lot easier. But they do offer a V6 engine, which is interesting in its own right because the 3500 cargo van cannot have the V6 engine, but the NV 3500 passenger van does have the V6 engine. Let's start out our comparisons by talking about towing capacity first. The NV towing rating comes in at 9,500 pounds, which is very large for this segment, but it is a hair smaller than the General Motors towing capacity in their top-end van. However, you do have to get the turbo diesel version of that GM cargo van in order to get that top tow capacity. If you need to tow high trailer rates on a low budget, the NV is going to be the less expensive way to go. The NV in 2500 form with the V8 engine, which will tow 9,500 pounds, is going to be $28,750. The diesel engine that GM uses is essentially borrowed from their pickup truck line. It's an awful lot more powerful than any of the other diesels that we see in this segment. We see small turbo diesels in the Ford van and in the Ram cargo van. However, the one that's in the Chevy is an enormous V8 engine, not a small 4-cylinder, not a small 5-cylinder like we see in the Ford and the Chrysler. Arguably, cargo vans are all about hauling widgets, and this is an area where the Nissan NV lags behind the competition. The pickup truck style long hood that we see in the NV cargo van is attractive to my eye, and it also makes maintaining your own van much easier because the engine is entirely under the hood. It's a lot easier to get to everything than in any of the other cargo vans that are out there right now. However, maintenance aside, it is going to be a little bit less efficient in terms of overall space, and that's really obvious when we start taking a look at the Ford and the Chrysler cargo vans, because they come in high roof versions just like the Nissan van. They're just about as long on the outside, but because they have those very tiny hoods up front, you can fit over 100 cubic feet more things inside your Ford Transit or your Ram ProMaster van than you can in the Nissan cargo van. So while you're shopping in this segment, you need to decide whether cargo capacity is important to you or whether the serviceability and the attractiveness of that long hood up front are more important to you. Maximum payload capacity is fairly similar across all the options in this segment. Obviously, you need to check all the options and specifications before you just throw 4,000 pounds in any of these vans, because engine options and other options in the vehicle, like getting the high roof, getting the V8 versus the V6, etc., those will change your maximum payload capacity ratings. However, Ford does top out this segment at over 4,500 pounds. Chrysler comes next at just over 4,400 pounds. GM and Nissan, they're down there right around 4,000 pounds. 500 pounds is not a huge difference between vans because, again, the actual options that you select in your van will change these numbers around. So if you get the high-top version of the Nissan NV with the V8, you can expect that payload capacity to come down a little bit. Determining which van is right for you can be a little bit tricky, but in my mind, the Nissan NV is really targeted at either the man in the van or small fleets. The Nissan NV's design means that it's going to be a little bit easier to maintain that engine under the hood. It also has proved to be quite a reliable vehicle. If you're driving one vehicle by yourself, fuel economy may not be quite so important versus a company that's driving 500 to 1,000 vans, and they're really taking a look at fuel economy as one of their main considerations. The NV is full of creature comforts and niceties that owner-operators may be more interested in. You have that larger footwell, so you're not baking your right leg as you drive. Unlike the GM vans, the seats are more comfortable. They're probably the most comfortable in this particular segment in terms of the front seat comfort. The available navigation system is easy to use. It's also relatively inexpensive. Nissan seems to have put a great deal more thought into storage solutions inside the cabin for your knickknacks, your files, your folders, etc. than any of the other manufacturers in this particular segment. The downside is the overall cargo capacity and the very thirsty V8 engine. The main selling point for General Motors cargo vans is the price tag. If you're a fleet buyer especially, GM's cargo vans will be very, very inexpensive compared to every other entry in this segment. They now use a 4.8-liter V8 engine and a 6-speed automatic transmission, which has proved to be very reliable and more fuel efficient than a lot of their engine and transmission designs of the past. Unfortunately, the GM vans are not the most efficient in this segment. The Ford and the Chrysler vans are going to be more efficient, so if you're a fleet customer and you're simply looking for low acquisition prices, the GMs are going to be less expensive, but the Chrysler and the Ford, they're going to be a little bit cheaper to operate in the long term. The GM cargo vans are truly the last traditional cargo vans available in America. It's really obvious when you take a look at that engine doghouse that cooks your right leg as you drive. However, if you're in a business that depends on power takeoff devices pulling power from the engine, like cleaning units in the back of a cargo van, that's going to be your only option. There's no power takeoff ability in something like the Nissan NV because the firewall is complete. There's no doghouse in the cabin. The engine is entirely under the hood. The Ram's main selling points are cargo capacity, payload capacity, which are both towards the top of the segment, fuel economy, which is absolutely excellent for the segment, and cargo practicality. The load floor height in the Ram ProMaster is easily the lowest in this segment, and it's lower than any of the other entries by about 8 inches or so. The way that Ram gets to that is, of course, because it's a front-wheel drive cargo van, and there are obviously some upsides and some downsides to the design. The big upside to the design is cargo practicality. We have that enormous cargo area, and it's much closer to the ground than in any of the other cargo vans. And if you have a fleet of vans out there and a fleet of employees out there, then you may be concerned about back injuries, etc. A lot easier to get cargo in and out of the Ram ProMaster van. On the downside, however, the Ram ProMaster is not as comfortable as the rest of the vans. It looks a little bit funny to the American eye because it is a European Fiat van that's been Americanized for sale here. The absolute best fuel economy in this segment is found in the diesel version of the Ram ProMaster, but there's a major drawback to that particular drivetrain. Instead of an automatic transmission like we find in the diesel Ford or the diesel GM vans, it uses an automated manual transmission. So it behaves very, very much like a manual transmission driver that's shifting a little on the slow side. Meanwhile, the Ford Transit is taking sort of a middle-of-the-road approach, somewhere between your traditional cargo van and something a little bit out of the ordinary like the ProMaster. It looks definitely European. It has that very efficient overall packaging size. We have factory high roof options, factory long wheelbase options, and in other world markets, the full-size Transit van is a front-wheel drive van. But in the United States, they changed things and they made it a rear-wheel drive van to better suit American tastes. Passenger hauling is excellent in the Ford, and there are a few more varieties of Ford passenger vans available than we see out of the Nissan NV. I frequently get asked about four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. They're not available from these 4 manufacturers at this time. GM used to offer an all-wheel drive system in their 1500 series van, but they don't offer that system anymore. However, there are aftermarket companies that will convert your Ford, your GM, or your Nissan vans into an all-wheel drive vehicle. You can't do that with the Ram ProMaster. Of course, the one van that is sticking out here that we haven't talked about yet is the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter. You can get the Sprinter with factory all-wheel drive, but the Sprinter is not exactly the same thing as these other vans. The Sprinter is fantastically expensive, especially compared to base Nissan vans or base GM vans. With a starting price of nearly $33,000 and starting off with a 2.1-liter 4-cylinder turbo diesel, there is also a 3-liter V6 engine available in the Sprinter, but that's also a diesel engine, and a diesel-only engine lineup is a problem for some fleet customers out there. But the bigger problem for fleet customers especially is going to be the price tag on the Mercedes Sprinter vans. That's why we don't see as many out on the road as we see the other van options. Because depending on how you configure your Sprinter, you can pay between 20 and 40% more than a comparably equipped van from these other competitors that we've been talking about. GM's vans, Ford vans, Nissan's vans, and Chrysler's vans, they're all very similarly priced. They're all competing in one segment, and then the Sprinter is sort of off in a small segment of its very own. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2016 Nissan NV cargo van. Again, my bottom line is if you're a man in a van or you have a small fleet, I recommend the Nissan NV because of its creature comforts, its more driver-focused nature. But if you're a larger fleet, especially if fuel economy is a concern, I would probably take a look at the Ram ProMaster. The Ford sits somewhere in between, and if you're after the lowest cost cargo vans, those would be the General Motors vans. I'll see you next week.